I'm Itamar Blauer, and this is SEO in 2025.
Itamar, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
The number one tip that I've got for SEO in 2025 is to not neglect the fundamentals. And what I mean by that is not to forget the core aspects and pillars that make up SEO in terms of your technical, content, and backlink foundations of your website, not to neglect those and make sure that you've still got a solid foundation there to work off of.
Technical, content, and backlink. Have the fundamentals stayed the same for the last couple of decades?
Yes.
Are they likely to change? Is there a new inductee to the fundamentals?
I really don't think so at this moment in time. I mean, there's AI developments, but those are sort of secondary in terms of how you can bolster these sort of core pillars, but I don't really see them changing.
So how do you go about spending your time on the fundamentals? What does it look like? Which aspects of the fundamentals do you focus on?
So I think you need to prioritize an order of importance. So you've got your technical side of things, which is essentially, do you have the right types of pages on your site? Are search engines able to crawl and read and understand these pages successfully? And are you optimizing in terms of what you want search engines, A, to crawl, but B, to also index? So keeping on top of those first and foremost, before you get into the actual quality of your content and building links, that's number one. And then when you move on to your content, it's making sure with the pages that you've got, are you optimizing for unique keywords for each page? And then once you have done that, have you actually comprehensively covered the content around your niche? Once you've done that, then that's when you get on to link building. So once you've sort of established your assets, your content there, building links and establishing more authority that's passed through from external sites, that's going to help at least to improve the perceived relevancy and authority in terms of how search engines can gauge the relevance of your content and hopefully influence how it ranks.
Brilliant. Okay, well, let's dive into a few key aspects of how you go about carrying out those different activities. So with search engines, how do you determine that they're indexing your site? And how do you know if what they're actually crawling is good or needs to be improved?
Sure. So Google Search Console, I think, should be the absolute basic tool that you use to understand what Google is seeing. So you've got the pages report where you can see what pages or what URLs are being indexed, what aren't, what are the reasons for that. So you might see that there's certain URLs that have been discovered, but they haven't actually been crawled, or you've got pages that have been crawled but haven't been indexed for whatever reason. So gauging what Google sees, I think, is important, because that's the main thing that you need to be aware of, is how does Google see my site and how am I able to make fixes, or what do I need to change based off of what you see? So as long as you kind of see that within these reports in Google Search Console that your most important pages, and by most important, I'm talking commercial pages. Because if you've got a website, most likely you're trying to get something out of it, right? You're not just a blog, you might be a service provider, an e-commerce shop. You want to make sure that the pages where users are able to find what they're looking for and convert, those are the pages that need to be indexed. So checking those first and foremost to make sure that all of those key pages are indexed, that's something that you want to do on Google Search Console. And obviously, if you've got a massive site, because of the actual limitations of Google Search Console, you might need to set up multiple properties so that you can kind of dig deep just to make sure, and you're thorough in your analysis to see actually, are all of my important pages being indexed and shown correctly?
And at this stage, are you looking at additional elements such as schema or different rich snippets that are being picked up for each page, or is that something that isn't looked at this stage?
I mean, you can, but at this stage, it's just making sure that the pages are there. There's nothing that Google sees that's wrong with the page. I think that's the sort of first step. If we're talking the fundamentals of technical SEO, those would be it.
Okay, and when you're talking about content, unique piece of content on each page, or rather actually unique keywords targeted on each page, I think you referred to. How do you go about, for instance, if you've got multiple pages on a website that are talking about similar things, selecting the right page for the right keyword phrase?
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, that's something that you can use Google Search Console to do. So you can have a look to see, for example, with what queries, if you specify a particular query, if you look then on the pages that are visible for that query, if you're noticing that there's multiple pages and they each have, let's just say, significant number of impressions, mainly impressions really, because that's just sort of showing your visibility, then what I would look to do is again, sort of strip it back, do a more thorough analysis of the SERP, what's actually being shown, and then you can determine actually, maybe I've got two pieces of content that really should just be one because they're covering the same kind of things. So I think the important thing is, first of all, you know, when it comes to understanding your audience and the funnel, seeing what types of core pages you need. And then if you do have other pages that complement that or are supplementary to that main content or topic area, then it may be worth seeing what other keywords that are unique to that. It might be longer tail keywords with different types of modifiers added to them or for specific use cases, seeing if that is warranted to be on its own page. So sometimes it is trial and error, but you can troubleshoot that with Google Search Console to sort of see where you're at.
Good. Okay. And in terms of Google, you mentioned Google Search Console there as well, but you also talked about the Google search engine and how you're indexed by it. Is Google a proxy for other search engines? Is it necessary to actually be aware of how you're indexed and what your pages look like in other search engines? Or if you're on Google, then that'll be fine for everything else?
I think it depends on how you've set up your robots.txt. I mean, there's certain things that Google cares about more. Like I would argue that schema markup really is something that I would say Google maybe cares more about that than potentially other types of search engine bots. But as long as within your robots.txt, you're not limiting other types of user agents from crawling your site, then you should be fine across the board, provided that you're set up with the sort of standard protocols for HTML and how web pages should be formatted and laid out.
And is there anything different that you're doing to try to ensure that your pages look good in social search, for example, as well? I mean, we hear more about TikTok being discovered in places like that nowadays. Is there anything that we need to do with thumbnails or the way titles are written in order to be more prominent when we're discovered in other places? Or is that not a primary focus for SEOs?
It depends what you're doing. It would be a primary focus more for your brand search maybe, as well as more tutorial or how-to or searches that typically warrant more types of social or multimedia displays on the SERPs. But other than that, I wouldn't say that they would be a massive focus. But if you are somebody that relies on a lot of tutorials, how-to stuff that is more visual by nature, then absolutely, like you should already be using other channels to try and market yourself.
And the third pillar that you referred to was link building. After the technical success and obviously content being published on your site, what aspects of link building are key to be aware of, to be focusing on, to be trying to acquire in 2025?
Yeah, I think naturally what you find and what I see with the vast majority of sites I come across is quite a sort of natural link profile where you've got the majority of the backlinks pointing to a site will go to the homepage. But something that I think people should be focusing more on is having links that point to your commercial pages. Because in reality, you care mostly about being competitive and ranking for commercial terms. And if you're not building links to commercial terms in a competitive space, you're going to have a hard time being competitive and showing up where you want to on the SERP. So in terms of the link building focus, I think, having a think about what your most important pages are, what are the ones that will drive the most business sort of value in terms of conversions, revenue, whatever it is, then building links to those pages, thinking about the anchor text, so the clickable text that the link is contained in, having that in terms of the variety of it, in terms of the context of that to the destination page, maybe using a variety of anchors if you've done your keyword research and have found that you've got maybe different types of ways that people search for the same thing, using that as a variety when you're building links to it from other websites. So those would be, I think, what the focus areas should be for people when you're doing link building. Obviously, if you're starting out on a new site, you are going to need links to your homepage. You're going to need to sort of build up the credibility and build up the sort of index in terms of search engines finding your site through other pages and other websites. But I think for established sites who are looking to be competitive, that should be the sort of focus from a link building perspective.
So what percentage of your time should be focused on fundamentals versus the next shiny object that appears in front of you?
I don't think SEO has changed as significantly as some people might think. So I think from that, you do need to spend more of your time getting the foundations right in terms of the technical. And once you've sort of sorted out the technical aspects, you don't really need to worry about that unless you're on some sort of custom build or something that needs to be updated regularly. Then it's really just focusing on your content, on your links. Once you've got your sort of content sorted out in terms of your main sort of content pillars or areas, and you've got all the commercial pages down, then it's scaling that up in terms of keeping up to date with changes within your niche. You could write about that on your blog. And from a link building standpoint, it's getting more links over time. And also the sort of freshness of links as well is important. So being consistent, not only just in your content, but also when you're building links, the consistency of that is going to be important.
I liked your focus on getting the technical health of your websites right to begin with, moving on to your content and then moving on to links after that. Once that's done, you can always go back. You can always do more to all those three areas. When you're at that stage, how do you decide what to prioritize?
You need to look at the data, right? So you need to see what your performance is. And I think that the performance needs to be prioritized in terms of what's making you the most money. So if you see your commercial pages aren't performing as well, you might need to then look deeper to see, okay, if I look at the SERP for the keywords I'm targeting here, what shows up? What types of content do the people who rank above me have that I don't? What types of links or how many links do they have or backlinks that I don't? So it's a case of niching down your focus towards the pages that make the most business impact, and then trying to then reverse engineer to see what is Google rewarding and how can I improve what I have. And it's quite tricky because when people have a site and they've built a site, a lot of times they've spent, hundreds of hours looking at the site, building the content. And I think you sort of get some kind of fatigue in terms of your objective thinking about your content and your website as a whole. So it's important to try and think as objectively as possible when you are doing this research to understand, actually, I'm not doing X, Y, and Z that other people are doing better. And that's sometimes where you might need to get a second pair of eyes to sort of help you see that, because like the fatigue I mentioned, if you're working on the same site for a long time, you might miss things. So that's where I think you can get the most value in terms of trying to be as critical and as objective as possible when you're auditing your own content based on the performance. If the performance isn't there, trying to figure out why and just being objective and really focused on the actual things you can do to improve.
So when you're having a conversation with a client about fundamentals and they're saying to you, but look at this, look what AI can do. Let's do this. Let's focus on that. How do you change their focus so that they're a little bit more comfortable with the value that focusing on fundamentals can do?
Well, I think if somebody's paying you money, you'd hope that they would want to, actually care about your opinion. Like they're paying for your time, they're paying for your expertise. I'm more than happy for clients to sort of share things that they've seen. And it's a similar thing of when you get forwarded emails from Google Search Console because one page has, not been indexed for some reason. And it never tells you the page as well, which is also why it gets forwarded and then I have to check and I'm like, okay, well, this is a page that you don't need index, so don't worry about it. But it's the sort of thing which is like, okay, look, if you're paying me to help you do this, it's like, this is the sort of clear goals and focus that we've agreed on. We're aligned on that. Let me cook. That's the sort of way that I sometimes see it. But there are some clients who want to be sort of more hands-on and more sort of engaged with what's happening, which is fine. But, you know, I think the education part is still important. So if somebody does come to me with that, it's just like, look, you know, we want to be doing the things that will make us be successful in the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years on search engines. That's what we want to do.
Let me cook. That should be a t-shirt.
Yeah.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2025?
I think something that should be, well, stopped. Stopped is an interesting sort of case. But the thing that pops to mind is Core Web Vitals. And I'm going to say that this is under the assumption you're using, or let's say under the assumption that you're not using a custom CMS and you're using a CMS that, you know, generally speaking is fine in terms of performance. And I think a lot of times websites get bogged down in the Core Web Vitals because the Lighthouse reports, they have, you know, sort of set numbers. It's from, you know, nothing to 100. And, you know, everyone wants to be at 100. But the reality is a lot of times for you to do work to get yourself to that point, you could be spending that time elsewhere to be improving the fundamentals. And of course, there are instances where maybe you're an e-com site, so speed is more important to you in terms of conversions. And maybe if you've got lots of multimedia, massive file sizes, and it's taking a while to load, then absolutely work on that. But in a lot of cases that I've seen, if you're trying to get from a 90 to a 95, why would you spend 5-10 hours doing that when you can be spending 5 or 10 hours working on your content or building links?
Itamar Blauer is Senior SEO Director at Studio Hawk, and you can find him over at itamarblauer.com. Itamar, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Dave.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.